Ambassador Marcus Rivera walked through the long crystal halls of the Galactic Council building. The walls were clear like glass but glowed with strange lights that moved in patterns. He knew these light patterns meant the alien leaders were angry with humanity. Above him, the ceiling stretched so high he could barely see the top. Marcus wore his simple black uniform with the Earth symbol on his chest. He walked slowly toward the main meeting room where thousands of alien beings waited for him. Each alien species had their own special area to live in during the meeting. Some needed water, others needed different gases to breathe, and some were made of rock or energy. The main door opened with a soft sound. Marcus stepped into the biggest room he had ever seen. Thousands of aliens turned to look at him. Some had tentacles, others looked like giant insects, and some were just clouds of gas that could think and talk. The air felt heavy with tension. At the front of the room sat the most important aliens on a raised platform. The leader was called the Vorthak Chancellor. It looked like a huge insect that walked on two legs. Its mouth had sharp parts that clicked together when it talked. The clicking sounds were not friendly. "Humanity," the Chancellor said in a voice that came from a machine translator. "You have been called here to answer for your crimes against Galactic Law 847. Marcus walked to a small platform in the center of the room. All around him, aliens watched from their special living areas. The Aquarians lived in big round containers filled with water. They had many arms like an octopus, and their skin changed colors when they were upset. Right now, their skin was flashing red and orange. The nebuloids were harder to see because they looked like moving clouds. But Marcus could tell they were angry because they kept getting thicker and thinner very fast. The Terrans looked like walking rocks covered in shiny gems for eyes. They never moved much, but Marcus felt them watching him carefully. In the back of the room, other aliens made different sounds. Some buzzed, others made music-like noises, and a few just flashed lights at each other. The translation machines worked hard to change all these sounds into words Marcus could understand. Marcus stood up straight and put his hands behind his back. He had been Earth's top diplomat for 20 years. He had talked to angry aliens before, but never this many at once. The room was so big that his voice would need the help of machines to reach everyone. "Honored council members," Marcus began, speaking clearly so the machines could translate his words. "Humanity knows you are worried about us, but we need you to explain exactly what we have done wrong." A sound like laughter came from many aliens at once, but it was not happy laughter. It was the kind of laugh people make when they think someone else is being stupid. The sound echoed off the crystal walls and made Marcus feel small. A new alien spoke up. This one looked like a tree made of crystal with flowing energy for leaves. It was called a Zephyrian, and when it talked it sounded like wind blowing through glass chimes. "You want explanation?" the Zephyrian said. Its energy leaves glowing brighter. "Your people have taken over 17 star systems in just 10 years. You dig up asteroids and destroy them for metal. You change entire planets to make them like Earth. And the worst thing, you make too many babies and refuse to control your population." Marcus nodded as if he was thinking carefully about these words. Around the room, more aliens began making angry sounds. Some of the smaller species started sending fast messages to their home planets using flashing lights. "I understand your concerns," Marcus said calmly. "What happens if we do not stop these activities?" The Chancellor leaned forward on its platform. Its sharp mouth parts spread wide in what Marcus thought might be a smile, but not a nice one. "You will stop all expansion to new star systems immediately," the Chancellor announced. "You will leave the systems you have taken. You will reduce your population by 40% within 1 galactic year." The room became very quiet. "This is your final warning, human. Do what we say, or face the same end as the Corvani people." When the Chancellor mentioned the Corvani, every alien in the room became still. Marcus knew about the Corvani. They had been a proud species that refused to obey the Council. The Council's armies had destroyed their worlds and scattered the survivors across the galaxy. Most Corvani now lived in refugee camps, begging for food and shelter. The aliens expected Marcus to become scared. They expected him to beg for mercy or ask for more time. They expected humanity to bow down like so many other species had done before. Instead, Marcus smiled. The smile was not big or mean. It was just a small, quiet smile that seemed to say he knew something they did not. The smile made some aliens uncomfortable. The Aquarians in their water tanks pressed their tentacles against the glass to get a better look at him. "Honored Chancellor and respected members of the Council," Marcus said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Before humanity gives you our answer, I think you should see something." Marcus pulled out a small crystal no bigger than his thumb. It looked very ordinary, like the kind of data storage device that any species might use for keeping information. To the aliens watching, it seemed almost insulting that he would bring something so simple to such an important meeting. "This contains a message from our home star system," Marcus said, holding up the crystal for everyone to see. "It was recorded right before I came here." Some aliens made sounds of confusion. Others seemed annoyed that Marcus was wasting their time with what looked like homework from school. The Chancellor's mouth parts clicked faster, showing its impatience. Marcus walked to the center of the room where a large machine could project images for everyone to see. He put his crystal into the machine and stepped back. "Computer," Marcus said clearly, "show the message from Earth." The space above the meeting room filled with a hologram showing stars and empty space. It looked like a normal view from any space telescope. Nothing seemed special or dangerous about it. The aliens began to make even more annoyed sounds. The Chancellor's clicking became louder and more angry. "Human, if this is supposed to frighten us with star maps." Marcus held up one hand to ask for quiet, but his smile never went away. "Please watch carefully. Computer, make the image bigger and focus on section Gamma 77. The star map zoomed in on what had looked like empty space. At first, it still looked empty. Then small dots appeared. The dots got bigger as the computer focused on them. Slowly, the shapes became clear. Ships. Thousands and thousands of ships. The sound that came from the aliens was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It was surprise, fear, and disbelief all mixed together. The Aquarians pressed all their tentacles against their tank walls. The nebuloids contracted into tight balls of gas. Even the rock-like Terrans began flashing their gem eyes very quickly. Marcus watched their reactions with satisfaction. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not as helpless as they had thought. "Computer," Marcus said in the same calm voice, "show them how many ships are really there." The image changed to show the true size of the fleet. Numbers appeared next to the formation of ships. The aliens could not believe what they were seeing. 15,000 ships in perfect formation, hanging in space like sleeping giants. "This is Battle Group 7, Marcus announced to the silent room. "It is one of 12 such groups currently positioned around this sector of space." The mathematics hit the aliens like a physical blow. 12 groups of 15,000 ships each meant 180,000 vessels. The number was so large that many aliens' translation devices stopped working for a moment. Marcus looked around the room at the shocked faces and energy patterns of the alien delegates. His smile grew just a little bigger. "Now," he said quietly, "shall we discuss humanity's response to your ultimatum?" The silence in the great meeting hall was so complete that Marcus could hear the soft humming of the life support machines. He had never seen so many aliens speechless at the same time. The Galactic Council, which had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, did not know what to say. Marcus enjoyed the moment. For the first time in galactic history, humanity had surprised the Council. The hologram still showed the massive fleet of human ships floating in space like a metal forest. Each ship was large enough to carry thousands of people and weapons that could destroy planets. The Vorthak Chancellor was the first to find its voice again. Its sharp mouth parts clicked together in patterns that the translation machine had trouble understanding. Finally, words came out. "Impossible," the Chancellor said. But its voice was not as strong as before. "Our sensor networks watch all space movement. We would have detected such a large fleet." Marcus nodded as if the Chancellor had said something very smart. "Your sensors are indeed very good. They are some of the best technology in the galaxy. However, they can only detect what they are allowed to see." The Aquarian delegate in the nearest water tank pressed all 6 of its arms against the clear wall. Its skin had turned a pale blue color that meant extreme confusion. When it spoke, its voice was just a whisper. "You are saying your ships can hide from our sensors? That is not possible." The energy. The Galaxy Council's last warning. Humanity's HFY response freezes the room. Signatures alone would be visible across star systems. Marcus smiled again. The same quiet smile that was making many aliens nervous. "Our stealth technology has improved greatly since the HFY War. We learned much from watching that conflict." This statement made every alien in the room pay attention. The HFY War had been fought only 15 years ago. It was recent history that everyone remembered. The Council had used it as an example of what happened to species that disobeyed galactic law. A Zephyrian delegate began flashing bright lights through its crystal tree body. "You watched the Corvani War? Your species was not involved in that conflict." "No, we were not involved," Marcus agreed. "But we were watching. We watched every battle, every strategy, every weapon that was used. We took very detailed notes." The room started to fill with nervous energy. Many aliens began sending urgent messages to their home worlds. The rock-like Terrans, who usually moved very slowly, were flashing their gem eyes in rapid patterns that meant they were thinking very hard. Marcus waited for the noise to calm down, then continued. "The fleet you see in the hologram contains 15,000 vessels. But I should clarify something important." He paused for effect. "These are not military ships." The Chancellor's clicking stopped completely. Around the room, aliens froze in whatever they were doing. The statement was so unexpected that many thought their translation devices had made an error. "Not military." The Chancellor's voice was much quieter now. "What do you mean?" Marcus gestured toward the hologram. "These are civilian vessels. They belong to our trading companies, exploration groups, and colonial settlement organizations. When they heard about this meeting and your ultimatum, they volunteered to escort me here." The nebuloid representative, which had been a tight ball of compressed gas, suddenly expanded into a large cloud of confusion. "Civilian ships? You expect us to believe that merchant vessels number in the thousands?" "Computer," Marcus said calmly, "display the technical specifications for the vessel named New Horizon." The hologram changed to show a single ship in great detail. Information scrolled past in the universal scientific language that all advanced species could read. The ship was enormous, larger than most military vessels that the Council used. But the information said it was designed to carry families and supplies to new colonies. An Aquarian delegate made a sound like boiling water. "Those are military-grade shield generators. And those weapon arrays? That is supposed to be a colony transport ship?" Marcus shrugged as if this was normal. "Space can be dangerous. Our civilians like to travel safely. Pirates, hostile aliens, space storms. You never know what you might encounter between star systems." The weapons on the New Horizon were more powerful than what most Council military ships carried. The shields could protect against planet-killing weapons. The ship could carry 12,000 colonists and still fight a war against an entire fleet. These modifications, the Chancellor said slowly, would require massive industrial capacity, advanced technology, coordinated manufacturing across multiple worlds. Marcus nodded approvingly. "You are absolutely correct. Which brings me to the real purpose of this demonstration." He turned to address the entire assembly. "You spoke of the Corvani as an example of what happens to species that defy the Council, but there is something important you should know about that war." Every alien in the room focused on Marcus with complete attention. Even the usually distracted gas-form nebuloids condensed into tight, listening shapes. "We were watching," Marcus said simply. "Every battle, every orbital bombardment, every refugee ship that escaped your enforcement action, and most importantly, we were learning." The weight of this statement settled on the room like a heavy blanket. The Council had fought the Corvani War as a demonstration of power. They had wanted other species to see what happened to those who disobeyed. But they had never considered that some species might watch and learn how to fight back. Marcus continued speaking in his calm, diplomatic voice. "The Corvani were a proud people. They had advanced technology, strong defenses, and brave warriors. They fought against overwhelming odds with great courage." He paused. "They lasted 6 months." The Chancellor leaned forward on its platform, as will any species that challenges the natural order. "The Council maintains peace through strength. The strong survive, the weak perish, and the galaxy remains stable." "An interesting philosophy," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Humans have a different view of what makes someone strong." Marcus walked back to the projection machine. "Computer display human industrial production data for the year 2387. New information filled the hologram above the room. The numbers were so large that several aliens' translation systems initially showed error messages. As the computers corrected themselves, the true scope of human industry became clear. The Chancellor's clicking became rapid and agitated. "These numbers cannot be correct. No single species maintains such production levels," Marcus read from the display. 23 billion tons of refined metals every month. 450 industrial worlds operating at full capacity. Shipyards capable of producing 1,500 new vessels every standard galactic month. He looked up at the assembly. These figures represent our peacetime economy. The Aquarian delegate's tentacles writhed against its tank walls. Impossible. No species maintains such industrial capacity without military conquest. The resource requirements alone would strip entire star systems bare. You are correct, Marcus agreed. Such production requires approximately 47 star systems with complete asteroid mining operations, 17 gas giant harvesting stations, and 32 dedicated manufacturing worlds. His smile returned, which is why we have been so enthusiastic about expansion. Unlike some species, we prefer to ask permission before we strip mine a system. The nebuloid representative had contracted into an almost solid sphere of agitation. You speak of industrial capacity, but production means nothing without military application. Manufacturing tells us nothing about your actual fighting strength. A fair point, Marcus nodded. Computer display comparative analysis. Corvani defensive capabilities versus current human military preparations. The hologram split into 2 columns of data. On the left side appeared information about the Corvani military at the height of their power. On the right side appeared humanity's current military statistics. The comparison made several delegates physically recoil from their viewing areas. The Corvani maintained 12 fortress worlds, Marcus explained in a conversational tone. We currently maintain 437 fortress systems. They had a standing fleet of 40,000 vessels. Our active fleet numbers just over 2 million ships. The numbers were so large that some aliens began making sounds of distress. Others started frantically sending emergency messages to their governments. The idea that a single species could build such massive military forces was beyond their experience. Marcus paused, studying the shocked expressions around the room. Of course, these figures only represent our home defense network, what we maintain to protect our core systems while our expeditionary forces handle external operations. The Chancellor's voice carried a new tone that the translation system struggled to identify. You claim to have built forces 50 times larger than the Corvani in the same period they were conquered. Marcus shook his head with a slight smile. Oh no, Chancellor. I think you misunderstand. He gestured to the display. These are not our military forces. This is our home defense network, what we keep around Earth and our oldest colonies for basic security. The chamber began to erupt in chaos as the implications of his words sank. In the great meeting hall exploded into chaos. Thousands of aliens began shouting, clicking, buzzing, and flashing lights all at the same time. The translation machines could not keep up with so many voices talking at once. Warning sirens began to sound as emergency messages flew between the different alien species. The Vorthak Chancellor struck its ceremonial gong again and again, trying to restore order. The deep ringing sound echoed through the crystal walls, but the aliens were too shocked to pay attention. Many had never heard information so terrifying in their entire lives. Through all the noise and confusion, Marcus stood quietly at his platform. His hands remained clasped behind his back and his expression stayed calm and patient. He had expected this reaction. Any species would panic when they learned that their understanding of galactic power had been completely wrong. The Aquarians in their water tanks were flashing every color possible. Their tentacles moved so fast they looked like underwater storms. The nebuloids had lost all shape and were just clouds of panic floating in their gas containers. Even the ancient Terrans, who had lived for thousands of years, were flashing their gem eyes in patterns that meant total confusion. After several minutes, the Chancellor's gong finally brought some quiet to the room. Aliens slowly stopped their panicked communications and turned their attention back to Marcus. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Before, they had looked at him as a representative of a weak species that needed to be controlled. Now they looked at him as a possible threat to everything they knew. The Chancellor's voice shook slightly when it spoke. Ambassador Rivera, the Council demands immediate verification of these claims. Our intelligence networks report no such military buildup in human space. Marcus nodded politely. Your intelligence networks are among the finest in the galaxy. However, they have been carefully managed for quite some time now. He spoke as if this was completely normal. We humans are quite skilled at showing people exactly what we want them to see. It is a useful ability when you are the newest species in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. A Terran delegate, whose crystal body had been completely dark during the chaos, finally began to glow again. When it spoke, its voice carried the slow weight of geological time. You have been concealing your true capabilities for decades. Not concealing, Marcus corrected gently, simply being modest. We humans have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. We have found that this approach prevents many unnecessary conflicts. The biggest Aquarian delegate pressed all its sensing organs against its tank wall. The implications of what you claim. If your species possesses such military might, why maintain diplomatic relations at all? Why not simply ignore the Council's authority completely? Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the question. Because we are not monsters. We believe in law, order, and peaceful cooperation between species. The fact that we could turn half this galaxy into radioactive dust does not mean we want to. His expression became more serious, but it does mean we will not allow ourselves to be bullied into agreements that would destroy our civilization. The statement hit the room like a physical blow. The casual way Marcus mentioned turning half the galaxy into radioactive dust made every alien understand that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Yet he had said it in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. The Chancellor's mouth parts had stopped clicking entirely. When it spoke, its voice was much quieter than before. What exactly are you proposing, human? Marcus reached into his other jacket pocket and withdrew a second data crystal. This one looked identical to the first, but he handled it with more ceremony. A counter-proposal. Humanity is willing to discuss reasonable limitations on expansion rates, voluntary population management, and resource-sharing agreements. He held up the crystal so everyone could see it clearly. This contains our detailed proposals for peaceful cooperation. It also includes specifications for several technologies we would be happy to share with Council member species. The offer of new technology was like throwing food to hungry animals. Despite their fear, many aliens could not hide their interest. Technology sharing was one of the main benefits of Council membership, but it usually flowed from older species to newer ones. The idea that humans might have technology worth sharing was almost as shocking as their military power. The Zephyrian delegates' energy patterns shifted to show curiosity mixed with caution. What technologies do you offer? Marcus smiled, knowing he had their attention. Faster-than-light communication that does not require quantum entanglement pairs. Medical techniques that could double the natural lifespan of most species. Terraforming processes that can make a planet habitable in years instead of centuries. Each technology he mentioned caused ripples of excitement through the assembly. Faster communication would revolutionize galactic trade. Longer lifespans would change entire civilizations. Faster terraforming would make expansion much easier for every species. Marcus paused for effect, then added, and of course, detailed specifications for the defensive modifications that make our civilian ships so robust. This last offer caused the biggest reaction yet. Every species in the galaxy worried about the safety of their civilian populations during space travel. Pirates, hostile aliens, and natural disasters killed thousands of civilians every year. The ability to protect them would be invaluable. The room fell into a different kind of silence. This was not the shocked quiet of fear, but the intense concentration of beings making complex calculations. Marcus could practically hear thousands of alien minds weighing the value of human technology against the risks of opposing human military power. The Chancellor looked around the chamber, reading the body language and energy patterns of the other delegates. When it turned back to Marcus, its tone was that of a leader who had suddenly realized the balance of power had shifted. And if the Council chooses to reject your proposals? Marcus's diplomatic smile faded completely, replaced by an expression of polite regret. Then humanity will withdraw from Council space entirely. We will establish our own territories, create our own trade networks, and form our own diplomatic relationships with interested species. The threat was elegant in its simplicity, but the implications were staggering. If humanity left the Council and offered protection to other species, it could split the galactic government in half. Many worlds already felt that Council policies were too restrictive or unfair. Marcus continued in the same calm voice. We would, of course, begin accepting refugee applications from species who feel that current galactic policies are limiting their potential. Several alien delegates shifted nervously in their environmental pods. The offer of human protection would be very tempting to any species that felt oppressed by Council rule. Given humanity's demonstrated military power, such protection would be very real. The Chancellor looked around the chamber again, seeing the same calculations in every delegate's posture. When it spoke, its voice carried the tone of a predator who had just discovered it was no longer at the top of the food chain. The Council will carefully consider your proposals. Marcus smiled and bowed respectfully. We look forward to productive negotiations. After all, the galaxy is vast enough for all our species to prosper together. He straightened up and his expression became almost cheerful. Though I should mention, those 12 battle groups I showed you earlier will remain in this area until our discussions are complete. You understand how humans worry about the safety of their diplomats. The casual mention of keeping a massive fleet nearby as protection sent another chill through the assembly. It was a polite way of saying that humanity would keep overwhelming military force in position until they got the agreement they wanted. Marcus began gathering his materials, as if the meeting was a normal diplomatic session. Around him the chamber remained frozen in stunned silence. Through the great windows that showed the stars, space itself looked different now. What had seemed like empty void might be filled with invisible watchers, hidden fleets, and the quiet strength of a species that had just announced it would no longer be anyone's victim. As Marcus walked toward the exit, delegates from dozens of species watched him go. Some were calculating how to profit from humanity's offer of technology sharing. Others were wondering if their own species might need human protection from Council enforcement. A few were already planning to send secret messages to their governments recommending immediate alliance with Earth. The age of human weakness was ending. The age of human partnership was about to begin. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, millions of human ships continued their patient vigil, waiting to see what choice the galaxy would make. Marcus reached the exit of the great meeting hall, but before he could leave, the Chancellor's voice echoed through the crystal chamber. Wait, the Chancellor called out, its tone much different than before. Before you go, the Council requires more information. We must understand the full scope of what humanity represents. Marcus stopped and turned back toward the assembly. His expression remained polite and professional, but something in his eyes suggested he had been expecting this request. Of course, Chancellor. What would you like to know? The holographic display was still showing the comparison between Corvani and human defensive capabilities. The numbers glowed in the air above the assembly like a reminder of how much the balance of power had changed. The Chancellor gestured toward the display with one of its sharp appendages. You mentioned that your home defense network is separate from your expeditionary forces. Explain this distinction. Marcus walked back to the center platform, moving with the confident stride of someone who held all the important cards in a game. Certainly. The home defense network protects our core systems, Earth, our oldest colonies, and our primary industrial worlds. These forces never leave human space. He gestured to the hologram. The 2 million ships you see here are essentially our police force. They handle pirates, respond to natural disasters, and provide security for civilian shipping lanes. They are not designed for offensive operations against major powers. The Aquarian delegate that had been asking questions pressed closer to its tank wall. If those are your defensive forces, what constitutes your offensive military? Marcus paused as if considering how much to reveal. Computer, display human expeditionary fleet composition, current deployment. The hologram changed to show a new set of data. The numbers that appeared made the previous statistics look small by comparison. Around the room, aliens began making sounds of distress again as they realized the situation was even worse than they had thought. Our expeditionary forces are organized into 5 separate fleets, Marcus explained matter-of-factly. Each fleet is designed for different types of operations. Fleet O handles exploration and first contact with new species. Fleet 2 manages trade route security and anti-piracy operations. Fleet 3 specializes in humanitarian missions and disaster relief. He paused, letting them absorb this information before continuing. Fleet 4 is our rapid response force for defending allied species from external threats. And Fleet 5? Marcus's expression became more serious. Fleet 5 is our strategic deterrent force. The Chancellor's clicking had become very rapid. How many vessels comprise these expeditionary fleets? Approximately 800,000 ships per fleet, Marcus answered casually. Though Fleet 5 is somewhat larger due to the specialized nature of its mission. The mathematics was staggering. 5 fleets of 800,000 ships each meant 4 million additional vessels. plus however many extra ships Fleet 5 contained. Combined with the 2 million ships in the home defense network, humanity possessed at least 6 million military vessels. A nebuloid delegate that had been silent until now suddenly spoke up, its gaseous form pulsing with agitation. 6 million ships requires crew populations in the billions. No species can maintain such forces without destroying their civilian economy. Marcus nodded approvingly. An excellent observation. Human military doctrine relies heavily on automation and artificial intelligence. Our average crew size is significantly smaller than most species employ. He smiled slightly. We learned early that machines do not panic in battle, do not require life support, and do not object to working in dangerous conditions. This revelation added another layer of concern for the aliens. Most galactic species used large crews because they did not trust machines to make important decisions. The idea that humans would put artificial intelligence in control of planet-killing weapons was terrifying to many cultures. The Terran delegate's crystal structure began flashing in deep, slow patterns. Artificial intelligence controlling military vessels presents significant risks. Machine logic may not properly evaluate the value of organic life. A valid concern, Marcus agreed. However, human AI is not independent. Every artificial intelligence in our military is linked to human commanders through quantum neural interfaces. The machines provide speed and efficiency, but humans make all critical decisions. The Chancellor leaned forward on its platform. You speak of current deployments. Where are these fleets positioned? Marcus gestured to the hologram, which changed to show a galactic map. Red dots appeared throughout known space, showing the positions of human forces. The pattern was clearly strategic, with concentrations near major trade routes, potential conflict zones, and council enforcement areas. Fleet 1 is currently operating in the Outer Rim, making contact with recently discovered civilizations, Marcus explained, pointing to clusters of dots in unexplored regions. Fleet 2 maintains bases along the major shipping lanes between council member worlds. More dots appeared on the map as he continued. Fleet 3 has units positioned near every major refugee settlement and disaster-prone system. Fleet 4 maintains rapid response bases within striking distance of all known conflict zones. The aliens studied the map with growing alarm. Human forces were everywhere, positioned to intervene in virtually any situation that might arise. The Council had thought they were dealing with an isolated species, but humanity had already spread across the entire galaxy. And Fleet 5? The Chancellor asked, though its tone suggested it was not sure it wanted to know the answer. Marcus's expression became completely serious. Fleet 5 positions are classified for security reasons. However, I can tell you that they maintain the capability to reach any star system in Council space within 72 hours. The implication was clear. Humanity could strike anywhere in the galaxy with overwhelming force in less than 3 days. The Council's own military forces were scattered across thousands of worlds and would take weeks to concentrate for a major operation. An Aquarian delegate spoke up, its voice shaking with either fear or anger. This is madness. No species builds such vast military forces for peaceful purposes. You must have aggressive intentions toward the rest of the galaxy. Marcus shook his head. Not at all. We build these forces because we have learned from history. Every species that has relied on others for protection has eventually been conquered or destroyed. His voice became harder. We refuse to let that happen to humanity. He gestured broadly toward the assembled aliens. For thousands of years, the Council has maintained peace through the threat of overwhelming force. You have made it clear that species must either submit to your authority or face destruction. We simply choose to be strong enough that submission is not our only option. The Chancellor's mandibles spread wide in what might have been frustration. The Council maintains order through collective agreement. We do not seek conquest, perhaps, Marcus said diplomatically, but from humanity's perspective, there is little difference between conquest and forced compliance with laws we had no part in making. He paused. We prefer to negotiate as equals rather than accept terms as subjects. The Zephyrian delegate's energy patterns shifted to show confusion mixed with something that might have been respect. You built this military force in secret while maintaining diplomatic relations with the Council. Such deception suggests sophisticated long-term planning. Marcus smiled again. We prefer to think of it as strategic patience. Humans are very good at long-term thinking when survival is at stake. He looked around the chamber. "We spent decades observing Council operations, studying your military capabilities and learning from conflicts like the HFY War." The mention of the HFY brought the conversation full circle. The Chancellor's voice carried a note of what the translation system could only render as grudging respect. The HFY fought bravely, but had no chance against Council forces. You studied that conflict and built a military force large enough to challenge the entire galactic government. We studied it and built a force large enough to ensure our survival, Marcus corrected. Whether that force could challenge the Council depends entirely on whether the Council chooses to make it necessary. The room fell silent as every alien contemplated this statement. Marcus had just told them that humanity's military preparations were specifically designed to fight the Galactic Council if necessary. But he had done it in such a polite, reasonable way that it sounded almost like a natural response to circumstance. The Chancellor looked around the chamber one more time, reading the expressions and energy patterns of delegates from hundreds of species. When it turned back to Marcus, its tone was that of a leader who was beginning to understand that the old rules no longer applied. The Council will need time to fully evaluate this new information. Marcus bowed respectfully. Of course, these are complex matters that deserve careful consideration. He straightened up with that same slight smile. We will wait for your decision with great interest. The great crystal chamber fell into a heavy silence as Marcus finished speaking. Every alien in the vast room was thinking furiously about what they had just learned. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in ways they never could have imagined, and now they had to decide how to respond. Marcus stood patiently at his platform, showing no signs of impatience or worry. He had delivered his message and made humanity's position clear. Now it was time for the Galactic Council to make their choice. Behind his calm expression, he was calculating the likely responses from different alien species and preparing for whatever came next. The Chancellor was the first to break the silence. Its sharp mandibles clicked together in patterns that suggested deep thought rather than agitation. When it finally spoke, its voice carried the weight of someone making a decision that would affect billions of lives. Ambassador Rivera, the information you have presented changes many assumptions the Council has held about humanity. We require time to consult with our member governments and evaluate all possible responses. Marcus nodded politely. Naturally. These are complex issues that deserve thorough consideration. He paused briefly. How much time does the Council require for these consultations? The question seemed simple, but every alien understood its real meaning. Marcus was asking how long humanity would need to wait before learning whether they would face war or peace. The answer would determine whether those hidden fleets would remain in defensive positions or begin offensive operations. The Chancellor looked toward the other senior delegates on the raised platform. Silent communications passed between them through light patterns, pheromone releases, and electromagnetic signals that most species used for private conversations. After several minutes of consultation, the Chancellor turned back to Marcus. The Council will reconvene in 72 standard hours to provide our formal response to humanity's proposals. Marcus smiled, and this time it seemed genuinely warm rather than diplomatic. 72 hours is perfectly acceptable. We appreciate the Council's willingness to give these matters proper consideration. But as he spoke, several alien delegates noticed something that made them uncomfortable. 72 hours was exactly the same time frame Marcus had mentioned for Fleet 5's response capability. Whether this was coincidence or careful planning, it suggested that humanity had anticipated this exact situation. A Terran delegate whose ancient crystal structure had been dark throughout most of the meeting suddenly began glowing with deep internal light. When it spoke, its voice carried the slow wisdom of a species that had witnessed the rise and fall of many galactic civilizations. Before we adjourn, there is a question that must be addressed. Ambassador Rivera, you have demonstrated humanity's military capabilities and made your proposals clear. But what assurance do we have that your species will honor any agreement we reach? The question sent a ripple of tension through the chamber. It was a polite way of asking whether humans could be trusted to keep their word, especially when they possessed such overwhelming military advantages. Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. That is a fair concern, honored Terran delegate. After all, we are asking you to trust a species that has concealed its true strength for decades. He walked closer to the raised platform where the senior delegates sat. However, I would point out that humanity has honored every agreement we have made with Council member species. We have never broken a treaty, defaulted on a trade contract, or failed to provide promised assistance to allies. His voice became more serious. Our word is our bond because we understand that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. The Aquarian delegate that had been most active in questioning Marcus pressed all its sensory organs against its tank wall. But now that your true strength is revealed, what prevents you from simply imposing your will on weaker species? Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the suggestion. What would prevent us? Our moral principles, our belief in the value of cooperation over domination, our understanding that a galaxy ruled by fear is ultimately unstable and dangerous for everyone, including the rulers. He gestured toward the holographic display, which still showed the positions of human fleets across known space. Consider this. If we wanted to conquer the galaxy, we could have done so at any time over the past decade. We possessed the military strength but chose diplomacy instead. That should tell you something about our true intentions. The Chancellor's clicking resumed, but in a different pattern that suggested acceptance rather than resistance. Your point is well taken, Ambassador. Actions do speak louder than words, and humanity's actions have been consistently peaceful, despite your hidden strength. Marcus bowed slightly in acknowledgement. We hope that pattern will continue. Humanity prefers to solve problems through negotiation rather than force. However, we also refuse to be anyone's victim. A new voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. It belonged to a Vorthon delegate, a species that had only recently achieved spaceflight and joined the Council. Ambassador Rivera, what happens to species like ours if the current system changes? We rely on Council protection because we lack the strength to defend ourselves. This question struck at the heart of many smaller species' concerns. They feared that any major change in galactic politics might leave them vulnerable to more powerful neighbors. Marcus's answer would determine whether humanity gained allies or enemies among the galaxy's weaker civilizations. Marcus turned toward the Vorthon delegate with the expression of genuine concern. Weaker species would be safer, not more vulnerable under the system we propose. Instead of relying on a distant council that may or may not respond to threats, you would have access to multiple sources of protection and assistance. He gestured broadly toward the assembly. Imagine a galaxy where species form voluntary alliances based on mutual benefit, rather than submission to central authority. Where trade and technology sharing happen because partners want to cooperate, not because they are forced to comply with regulations. The Nebuloid representative, which had been silent for several minutes, suddenly spoke up. You describe a galaxy without central coordination. Such a system could lead to chaos, constant conflicts between rival alliances. Marcus shook his head. Not necessarily. Humans have experience with voluntary confederations of independent states. Such systems can be very stable when all parties benefit from cooperation. He smiled slightly. And they tend to be much more innovative than centralized bureaucracies. This comment caused some uncomfortable shifting among the council delegates, who knew their own system had become increasingly rigid and slow to adapt over the centuries. The Chancellor rose from its position on the raised platform, signaling that the formal session was coming to an end. The Council has much to consider. Ambassador Rivera, you and your delegation are welcome to remain in Council space during our deliberations. Quarters will be provided at the diplomatic compound. Marcus bowed formally. The Council's hospitality is most appreciated. However, I should mention that humanity has prepared for all possible outcomes of these negotiations. His tone remained diplomatic, but there was steel underneath. We hope for the best but have planned for every contingency. The statement was both reassurance and warning. Marcus was telling them that humanity was prepared to implement whatever response became necessary, whether it was peaceful cooperation or something far more decisive. As the formal session ended, delegates began filing out of the great chamber toward their various species' quarters. But instead of the usual post-meeting discussions and social interactions, most aliens moved quickly and quietly. Everyone needed time to process what they had learned and communicate with their home governments. Marcus gathered his materials and walked toward the exit, but he was not alone. Several smaller species delegates approached him quietly, clearly interested in private conversations. The promise of human protection and technology sharing was already beginning to fracture the Council's unity. As he left the chamber, Marcus looked back one final time at the holographic display still showing human fleet positions across the galaxy. In 72 hours, the Council would give their answer. But regardless of what they decided, the galaxy had already changed forever. The age of unquestioned Council authority was over. The age of human partnership was beginning, and in the vast darkness between the stars, millions of ships maintained their quiet vigil, ready to enforce whatever decision their diplomats made. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity, once awakened to its full potential, was a force that could not be ignored, controlled, or easily stopped. The next 72 hours would determine whether that force would be used for construction or destruction. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again.